Good morning. It is day 6 of the Donald Trump criminal trial in Manhattan. Yesterday, opening statements were delivered. The first witness, David Pecker, was called to the stand. We heard about 15 or 20 minutes or so of David Pecker, the prosecution's first witness. And David Pecker is going to go the whole day today. Karen, I want to get your analysis of what we can expect with Pecker's testimony, how damaging you think it's going to be for Donald Trump, why you think the prosecution picked David Pecker to go first. I also want to get your take on what you thought of the two sides' opening statements thus far, also what you've heard about the jury paying attention, their attentiveness to this case, the writing of notes. And let's just remind everybody that every day we do a handy dandy scorecard right there. This was yesterday's scorecard. I'm a visual learner, so I like to create a scorecard each day to remind everybody what went down. Yesterday, on Monday, Justice Merchan, the judge presiding over the case, made a Sandoval ruling, or several rulings under the Sandoval case, about the permissible scope of cross-examination by the prosecution of Donald Trump if he takes the stand. The jury was sworn in, given their initial charge. Opening statements began. Prosecutors called their first witness, David Pecker. Trump's lawyers, in their opening statement, had argued that they thought that there was nothing wrong with influencing elections. The court adjourned. And in the hallways, Donald Trump attacked Michael Cohen. One thing to add to Donald Trump's potential gag order violations as well is, Karen, there's going to be a contempt hearing regarding Donald Trump today. Was Donald Trump went on last night, did an interview with right-wing media where he was asked kind of a softball question about how his family is holding up on Steve Bannon's network. And Donald Trump responded by making some statements about the jury that I want to run by you in just a little bit to see if you think that's a gag order violation. Do you think that's going to be brought up at the contempt hearing today? Want to share with you some court reporters and what they are saying, or reporters in the courtroom, what they're saying yesterday. Susan Craig wrote that Trump was struggling to stay awake. His eyes were closed for a short period. He was jolted awake when his lawyer Todd Blanche nudged him, sliding a note in front of him. Olivia Nuzzi wrote, Trump is tilting his head dramatically and making trout-like movements with his mouth as he listens to Justice Merchan. So we and a few others had some fun with that and showed what that may be looking like and what the jury may be seeing. We got that photo, we got that photo, we got that photo. Choose your own adventure there, and I'm sorry, folks, for showing you any of those. When we talk about AMI, the parent company of the National Enquirer, the company that used to be led by David Pecker, the witness, and this catch and kill scheme, one of the initial catch and kill schemes, whatever, that Pecker was involved in was to silence, and this was talked about in the opening statement by the prosecution, was to silence the story about Karen McDougal, who Donald Trump had a long-term sexual relationship with while Melania was pregnant and while Melania gave birth. Just so everybody wants to see kind of the photo of who Karen McDougal is, here is a family photo that Donald Trump took, and you'll see Melania on the left, you'll see Ivanka right next to him, and that's Karen McDougal right there, who he was having an affair with Melania. Here's another photo of Donald Trump and Karen McDougal as well. And the next photo I'm going to show you is Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels. Interestingly, while Donald Trump was cheating on Melania with McDougal, he was cheating on McDougal with Stormy Daniels that one night. And so we're going to hear, I think, a lot about what was going on, not because the salacious details matter so much as why they were trying to hide this in connection with the 2016 election. Here's a photo of David Pecker from the former chair of AMI right there. And David Pecker was very close to Donald Trump. They had a very long history together of working together to print damaging stories on Trump's opponents historically, and then leading to the 2016 2016 election. So let me pause there before showing you some of these video clips, because I've talked for quite some time. But as I've always said, I view myself as your hype person. I want that audience to grow before turning it over to you, Karen, but giving people that summary in the meantime. Tell us what you made of yesterday's proceedings. What can we look forward to today?
Yeah, so yesterday was just stunning to me how quickly this judge is moving through this trial. I thought for sure that we were going to have Monday and Tuesday off for the Jewish holidays. It's Passover. And then Wednesday was going to be the judge's calendar day. But this judge is saying, nope, people come in and we're going to open. We'll have he did a Sandoval ruling, and people call your first witness. And that's what they did yesterday. They called their first witness, David Pecker. After these opening statements, the opening statements were about what you'd expect, about 45 minutes long each. That's about what you would expect an opening statement to be. And the judge also gave his Sandoval ruling, where he balanced, where the Sandoval ruling, then, if you recall, is when the prosecution says, these are the prior bad acts I want to be able to go into if Donald Trump takes the stand. And it's mostly stuff involving Donald Trump's civil cases, the E. Jean Carroll cases, and the Engoron civil fraud case. And the judge said he's going to allow most of what the prosecution asked for. There was one case involving it was Trump v. Clinton, where it was a lawsuit that was thrown out because it was frivolous. That's one that the judge did not find was probative or was too prejudicial, and so he did not let that in. And he also reaffirmed that the Access Hollywood tape is not coming in, but the contents of the tape can come in, just not the actual tape. So those were the kind of housekeeping pretrial things that happened, and then there were opening statements. And the opening statements was for the people, it was Matt Colangelo, who's someone I've never worked with before. He comes from the Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice, and somebody who's, I think, has worked with Alvin Bragg in the past. And they let him do the opening, which I was a little surprised, but I hear he did a great job. But I was just surprised just because I thought that they'd have Josh Steinglass, who's the real senior lawyer, do that. I mean, sometimes that's what they do, is they split it up. Someone does the opening, someone does certain witnesses, someone does the summation, or et cetera. And that's what they're doing here. So, and then Todd Blanche gave the opening for the defense. And I thought it was really interesting that there was a line that he said that was essentially, there's nothing wrong with influencing an election. That, he said, spoiler alert, there's nothing wrong with influencing an election. That's what a democracy is. And that's going to be their defense. And I think you heard from the prosecution, though, it's not election influencing, it's election fraud. And so that's where I think you're going to see the difference between the two theories of the case. And of course, you're allowed to try to influence an election. You're just not allowed to fraudulently and illegally do it. And if you do it through campaign donations, you have to report it. So the fact that that Donald Trump is alleged to have had him and his Trump organization, et cetera, do these illegal campaign contributions and then fraudulently document it in the books and records in order to suppress these stories, that's the difference between the two cases. But I thought it was interesting that that Todd Blanche, who represents Donald Trump, leaned into that. So they also very much talked about Michael Cohen. They both see him to be pivotal and central to the case because he was talked about in both of their openings. And I think Michael Cohen is going to be the star of the show. Certainly everybody's waiting to see him testify and see how he does. But the prosecutors didn't start with him. They started with David Pecker, which I think is really smart to do, because David Pecker is the guy who really sets the stage. He's going to set the whole stage of where we were back then and what was going on back then. And so I expect you're going to see that today once we get started, Ben. He is not the trial with the jury does not resume until 11 o'clock, because before that is going to be a violation hearing on the contempt on the gag order. But before we talk about the gag order, I just want to finish talking about what I expect Pecker's testimony to be. And he just imagine he's painting the picture of what it was like back in 2015, 2016, because that is what the prosecution is going to try to do. They're going to try to bring the jury back to where we were almost 10 years ago now, 9 years ago, before Donald Trump had the kind of poll numbers and the following that he has now, where back then he was still this kind of fringe candidate who was a long shot candidate who some people weren't even taking seriously and didn't think he had a chance. And so it was a crowded field back then, and in the Republican candidates, and he didn't have this kind of intense following that he has now. And so they were very much did not want certain stories to come out, and they planted negative stories about his opponents, and they also tried to suppress and did suppress negative stories about Donald Trump. And David Pecker was very much involved in that criminal conspiracy. He's a co-conspirator, and he's going to talk about the 2015 meeting where they all hatched this plan, where it was him, Donald Trump, and Michael Cohen hatched this plan to do just this. And that's what they did. And it almost didn't matter and doesn't matter if the stories are true or not. We're going to hear all about Donald Trump's sex life, but it doesn't matter whether he had an affair or didn't have an affair with either Karen McDougal or Stormy Daniels. In fact, the doorman story about him fathering a child out of wedlock was debunked and turned out to not be true. So it doesn't really matter whether the stories are true. It's the fact that they didn't want them coming out. And so it was all, and what David Pecker and other witnesses are going to testify to is the significance of that Access Hollywood tape that came out in October, where it was right before the election in 2016 in October, and it had just come out. And at that point, that was really, really intensely damaging to his campaign, or at least they thought it was. And you're going to hear from Hope Hicks, who's going to testify to that as well. And she was very much a communications person in the campaign, and she's going to give context to how important that story was. So you're going to hear, I think, Mr. Pecker talk a lot about that today, and talk about just what was going on back then, and to really bring the jury back to that period of time so they can understand why it was so important for the campaign to suppress this information. So that's what you're going to see. But all eyes are waiting for Michael Cohen and Hope Hicks, et cetera. I think those are going to be the big witnesses that are that people really are interested in hearing what they have to say. And then, of course, we'll see if they call Stormy Daniels. I think they will, but they don't have to in order to prove their case here. But we'll see what they end up doing. But before we even get to Mr. Pecker today, the judge is having a hearing on the gag order and to see whether Trump violated it. Frankly, when he got out of court yesterday, Ben, he got out of court, went on TV and started talking about and going after Michael Cohen, which was shocking to me, because to me that was another 11th violation of the gag order. So we'll see what the judge thinks of that today. And the hearing is going to be brought from the prosecution. They filed an order to show cause. This is a criminal contempt that they're bringing. So they're asking that Trump be punished. and it is under the judiciary law, and it's a criminal contempt proceeding. The order to show cause essentially it becomes the complaint or the allegations, and the prosecution has to prove this to the judge beyond a reasonable doubt. And if the judge finds that Donald Trump was in contempt, then he could fine him, he could jail him, he could warn him. There's lots of things he could do. Let's see what he does. And let's see if they bring up this new violation that happened yesterday in court. Now, there's 3 different kinds of contempt in New York. It's a very, very confusing landscape. And in fact, I worked with some people, Norm Eisen and others, and co-authored an article for Just Security on the law of contempt that came out yesterday, and trying to explain it, because it really is a complicated rubric of statutes. There's essentially 3 different kinds of contempts. There's civil contempt, which is designed to get someone to do something. So it's called coercive contempt. So you're trying to, if Donald Trump doesn't stop intimidating witnesses, the judge could do civil contempt, which is coercive, to coerce him to stop, to force him to stop. And you do that by essentially most of the time by either fining them daily, and having the fines accumulate, or by putting them in jail. So, but that's not the one that's happening today. Today, it's criminal contempt under the judiciary law. There's another kind of contempt as well, which is summary contempt, and that's contempt if it happens in court, and because the court has the ability to maintain order. And so the violations of the gag order that happen in the hallways, the judge could argue that that's happening in court. And so we'll see. He has the ability to just make a determination right then and there, and to say, this is what you did in court. And so he could summarily hold him in contempt there. But we'll see if he actually does that, or if he just warns him once again. The one thing I can tell you for sure is Judge Merchan is not slowing this case down. This case is going, and he is not allowing any delays to happen. So he's keeping control of his courtroom. The other thing I noticed from yesterday was Trump's behavior in the courtroom. I think he realized he's learned from his prior jury trials, the E. Jean Carroll cases, as well as the case in front of Judge Engoron, the civil fraud trial. But in his prior jury trials, his bombastic attacks and his attacks to the judge, I think that really hurt him, and the jury punished him with these big verdicts. So I think he realizes that going after the judge is not a good tactic. The juries see that. Juries really like judges. The judges are the ones who buy them lunch, and who tell them who they view as kind of the person who's not the advocate, right? You got one side trying to do one thing, the other side trying to do something else. The judge sits on top of that and really takes care of the jury. The judge talks to the jury. Yesterday, there was a juror that had a dentist appointment, and so they had to leave early, and that's the judge who says that the jury can leave early to go to a dentist appointment. And so so the juries become really close to the judge, and it happens. It goes more and more as the trial goes on. So if one of the parties attacks the court, I think that can be very, very damaging to them. And so by all accounts in the courtroom, Donald Trump is keeping quiet. He doesn't appear to be making faces or gestures, at least on day one. So, but let's see how it goes today, and how the trial continues. And but it started. We are deep into the trial. We are already into the trial.
I'm not sure we can fully give Donald Trump because he beat for about 2.5 hours. I think time will tell what is going to unfold, especially when I'm fairly confident he will be held in contempt in a few hours. Do you think that? To me, the bigger question is, what's the penalty, especially in light of Donald Trump's ongoing conduct since the motion's been filed? Do you have any doubt?
I think he's going to do a couple things. I think he's going to say, I think what Judge Merchan is going to say is, to the extent that Mr. Trump, you thought that retweeting or reposting what someone else put, to the extent that you think that that doesn't violate the gag order, I'm going to warn you that does. To the extent that he flagrantly goes out and makes statements attacking witnesses, I do think he will find him in contempt. So the first three that that the prosecution asked that he be held in contempt, I think those first three are going to, he will find him in contempt. I think the reposting, he might give him a warning. Anything involving the jury, I think he will also hold him in contempt. And I think he'll start with just a fine, the $1,000 fine for each that the prosecution asked for. But I think he'll give him a stern warning, and he'll say, do it again. And next time it'll be something else. That's what I think. I think he'll parse it.
You know, Donald Trump posted or sent this message out to his supporters and those on his email list saying, "My farewell message." This is what he said yesterday. "Tomorrow I could be thrown in jail. I hope this isn't goodbye. ... So that's the message he's sending to try to fundraise. But, you know, I think the most egregious of all of the statements Trump made was one he made last night. MeidasTouch.com broke this story. I want to give a hat tip to our great editorial team for breaking this story. All the media has now been covering this story. But it was this interview on right-wing media network owned by Steve Bannon called Real America's Voice. And in this interview with a guy named John Fredericks, he asked Donald Trump, you know, these are like the biggest softball questions. And he asked Trump, tell me about how your family is holding up during the trial. And listen to what Donald Trump says about the jury in a question about how is your family holding up. Let's play this clip.
We know each other a very long time. How's your family holding up through all this?
Well, look, it's always tough when you can't go to your son's graduation. You know, he's a great student and he's a good boy, and you tell him you can't go to his graduation. This judge, who is a totally conflicted person, by the way, totally, he should not be the judge of this case. He's so that nobody's ever been as conflicted as him, just about. But this judge said that you can't get away from the trial. You know, he's rushing the trial like crazy. Nobody's ever seen a thing go like this. That jury was picked so fast. 95% Democrats. The area is mostly all Democrat. You think of it as just a purely Democrat area. It's a very unfair situation, that I can tell you.
I mean, him saying that about the jury, very unfair, 95% Democrats, which I'm not even sure if that's even close to being true based on, I'm not going to get into jury identities, but I'm not necessarily sure that's even close to be true. But that's the kind of statement to me that's even far more egregious than even the witnesses, in my opinion, because, you know, I mean, look, the witnesses, no witness ever deserves that. In my own mind, though, the witnesses have some level of being involved in Donald Trump's orbit a little bit and in his circus and in his mess. And that doesn't justify the conduct by Trump, even a scintilla. But when Trump's directing statements like that at a sworn-in jury the night before a contempt hearing, you know, that's where, I mean, you know, it really compounds everything else that he did, that he made that statement. Do you think I'm overreacting to that clip from last night? Or do you see, there are some people go, well, he didn't direct it at a specific juror. He said the jury is 95% Democrat and they're unfair. Subsection C of the gag order specifically says that Trump's precluded from making statements about the jury or directing others. How do you think about that statement?
So the first thing I thought about when I was listening to that statement was, when was the phone call placed? When was this interview, right? Was it before or after the gag order? And there's a few things that
It was after. It was last night. It was last
well,
night.
we know we aired it last night, but my question, so the question is, when was it taped, right? When was it recorded? It didn't necessarily get recorded. That's one of the things that a prosecutor, if you're a prosecutor, you have to prove that, right? So that's one of the things that that I was thinking, because that's one of the things that the judge is going to think about. But there's two things that tell me that it is in violation of the gag order. Number one, the lie that Judge Mershon said he can't go to Barron's graduation. We know the date that the conversation happened, and the date that Donald Trump has been saying that the judge won't allow him to go to the graduation, which the judge never said, by the way. The judge said, we'll see. I'm not making a ruling one way or another. That's a long way off. So we do know, we can pinpoint that it was after that date, right? But then he talked about the jury itself, and he said the jury is 95% Democrat. So clearly it was after the jury was picked. But that was what I was listening to, was for, because that's one of the things that the prosecution's going to have to establish, is when was this phone call made? And I think they'll be able to establish that. And if I were the prosecutor on this case, I would argue that Donald Trump is trying to intimidate this jury into acquitting. That what he's trying to do is say, look, you're biased, you're all Democrat, and you're not going to listen to the evidence. And so if it's anything other than an acquittal, then it means you're biased, that it wasn't based on the evidence, it wasn't fair. And that can be very intimidating if you're a juror trying to live your life and you're afraid of, what are the consequences? What is he going to do? What is he going to say? What are people going to think? I think that is a bridge too far. I think the judge is not going to like it at all. I think about the famous Oscar, the Will Smith situation, where it's, I think the judge is going to say, keep the jury's name out of your mouth, sir. Do not mention this jury. That's what I think the judge will do.
Well, it's going to be an eventful day, that's for sure. Karen, thank you for keeping all of the Meidas Mighty and Legal AFers up to date each and every day. A reminder that every morning at this time, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, and I will be live to preview what we think will be happening in today's court proceedings based on all of the available data. Of course, Karen was the number 2 at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and at times served as the acting district attorney. She's worked nearly 30 years at the office that's now prosecuting Donald Trump. So her insights here are absolutely invaluable, and it's such an honor to get her firsthand expertise. So every morning we'll tell you what we expect is going to happen today in court. And then after the court proceedings wrap up, we'll show you our handy dandy scorecard for that day. And we will review everything that went down each and every day to keep you fully up to date and apprised on all of the facts. So it's going to be a busy day. Buckle up, folks. Karen, thank you for all of your insight. It's truly, truly incredible to have you lead this coverage. Everybody, make sure you hit subscribe. You may think you're subscribed to the MeidasTouch channel, but you may not actually be subscribed. So please hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Legal AF audio podcast, wherever audio podcasts are available. Just search Legal AF, hit subscribe there. That goes a long way to help as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and keep checking back on the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for breaking news alerts, and I'm sure there will be a lot of them today. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Enough! Send it to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.meidastouch.com. That's